I'm over, I'm dead. Pogba doesn't exist anymore.
Paul Pogba was sarcastic when he uttered these words in an interview. This was, according to the Frenchman, what people thought whenever something minor went wrong in his career. Fast forward to today, and now that he actually is in a world of trouble, what he has said in the past perfectly describes the reality of his current situation. But who would have thought that Paul Pogba, once the most expensive player in the world and a World Cup winning superstar, would turn into the ultimate wasted talent? Paul Pogba knew better than anyone else that his whole career was on a knife's edge when he was randomly selected for a doping test on August the 20th, 2023. The verdict has fallen, and a return to football for Pogba looks incredibly unlikely, which begs the question, was Pogba's reaction to a random doping test back when he was in Manchester a foretelling of his fate?
Again.
Paul Labille Pogba was born on March the 15th, 1993 in Rosy-en-Brie, a suburb of Paris. His parents, Fassou Antoine and Yio, were Guinean, and they used to live in Conakry before Paul was born. Stricken with poverty, the Pogbas would ultimately join millions of other African families who moved into Europe in the early 1990s. It was Fassou Antoine who first arrived in France, and a few months later, Yio joined him. Paul's parents had a single ambition: a better life. Not necessarily for themselves, but for their children at least. Paul was their third child, after his older twin brothers Florentin and Matthias. Two influential figures who would soon inspire Paul and push him further down the abyss in the case of Matthias. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Already not on the best of terms before their reunion in France, Fassou Antoine and Yio's relationship worsened over time and broke off completely when Paul was only 2 years old. Whichever way you looked at it, Paul was destined to experience a tough childhood. Luckily for Paul and his brothers, their mother was as tough as nails. Growing up on the Renardier housing estate in Rosy-en-Brie, pretty much everything could go wrong for the brothers, as they were literally surrounded by violent gang activities and bad influences from the neighborhood. Yio feared for her children. She had taken so much risk just to reach France and had left everything behind, including her own past, just to give them a better chance of making it in life. The ever-burning question she had on her mind was this: how was she going to keep her children away from all that trouble? The question was complicated, but the answer was simple: football. Football was the only solution to keeping the boys on the right track. Even though Florentin, Matthias and Paul didn't necessarily feel that way in the beginning, Yio knew that the beautiful game could be their golden ticket. Fassou and Yio were separated, but Yio wanted the father of her children to know anything that concerned their kid's future. Pleasantly surprised by the mother's decision to help their kids pursue a career in football, something clicked in Fassou's mind, and he instantly became more attached to the family. And the reason behind his mental switch was his very own background. Fassou had to abandon his dreams of becoming a football player himself. So as soon as he heard about the kids trying their luck at the game, he too became supportive, just like Yio, if not more. Thus started the footballing journey of the Pogba brothers. And in a very short time, everyone knew who out of the three would really make it. Paul was already exposed to the game thanks to his brothers, but it was playing with kids his age that made him fall in love with the game. As early as 6 years old, to give him a better chance at success in football, Yio decided to homeschool Paul. Football had officially become his life. His first ever football team was US Rosy-en-Brie, and his coach, Sambo Tati, would recall how he would basically toy with his opponents.
Paul, dans son enfance, c'était un enfant funny, qui aimait travailler. Une fois, on va en tournoi à Saint-Raphaël, il était en poussin. Il prenait la balle, il marquait. Et les parents à côté, ils disent non, dis-lui, ça doit être un Benjamin, ils ont triché. On leur dit non, c'est un poussin. Tellement que pour lui, c'était facile.
When he was 13, everyone knew that it was time for Paul to go up a level. And so he did that and then some. In as short as 2 years, Paul's talent would take him from US Torcy to Le Havre and then to an out-and-out European giant. In his second season with Le Havre, Pogba was already the captain of his team, and he had led them all the way to the end of the Under-16 National Championship, only to barely lose the title to Lens. It didn't really matter though, because that season made Pogba a national phenomenon. He had his first French international team call-up via the Under-16 French national team, The national team was going to be the very place which will somehow become the safe zone for Pogba, sheltering him from most of his future troubles. Anyways, even though he was popping up on every European club's radar, the president of Le Havre, Jean-Pierre Level, was not bothered, because the club, Pogba, and his family had a non-solicitation agreement in place since 2006, and it would keep Pogba at the club for 2 more years. At least, that was what Level hoped for. So when Pogba announced that he'd be joining Manchester United's academy in 2009, Level was sad, but he wasn't exactly surprised, because for him, the reason why things had turned out the way they did was clear. Unfortunately, he left because I think that the whole family, the whole entourage, was not trying to keep him. They were there mainly to benefit from the money. Everyone sought to benefit from this career before thinking about Paul's future. This was one of the earliest signs of Paul Pogba and his not-so-conventional way of doing business. Of course, he was still a minor, and the main motivators behind his moves were people in his entourage rather than his own desires. Following Pogba's move to United from Le Havre, and the Red Devils found themselves in a legal battle. The French club accused United of stealing their talent by offering very high sums of money to the parents of the player. In the end, United were cleared of any wrongdoing by a judge appointed by FIFA, which finally officialized Pogba's move. The transfer saga validated multiple things at the time. 1, Pogba was a talent worth fighting for, the kid was a baller, and 2, he had a hard-to-deal-with entourage. Bear in mind, this was before he even became a client of Mino Raiola. Making it in Le Havre and making it in Manchester were 2 different things. His talents had brought Pogba to United, but he was going to need more than that to leave his mark there. The young Frenchman spent the majority of his first 2 years in Manchester going up and down between the under-18s and reserve team. During one of his performances with the reserves, he struck the eye of Mino Raiola, who quickly became Pogba's friend and representative. The Foxy agent had also become someone Sir Alex Ferguson absolutely despised. The Scotsman was very much aware of Pogba's talent and performances, but he also had sensed that things could very well go out of hand for him. According to former Lyon and Marseille goalkeeper Pascal Ometa, who was invited to Carrington by Sir Alex himself back in 2011, the legendary manager had seen it all.
Sir Alex appelle Paul Pogba, il avait 17 ans. Il me dit, tu vois ce joueur, ça sera un joueur extraordinaire, bourré de talent. Déjà, à cet âge-là, il sera au top du top. Mais par contre, c'est un rêveur. Et s'il n'y a pas quelqu'un qui est là pour lui tracer sa voie, il n'y arrivera jamais.
Despite his concerns, before the start of the 2011-12 season, Sir Alex Ferguson took to Manchester United's official website and let the whole Red Devil fandom know about this special player coming through. If we hold Pogba back, what's going to happen? He's going to leave. You know, in a couple of years' time, when his contract is going to finish, so we have to give him the opportunity to see how he can do in the first team, and he's got great ability. Ferguson's plan was to introduce Pogba to first-team football gradually. But where he saw a slow and steady progress, Pogba saw a man who was wasting his talent. Behind the scenes, Mino Raiola was influential, especially in the Frenchman's big leap of faith. At age 19, Pogba decided to leave United to join Juventus. A free transfer which would give the Frenchman more game time, a new challenge, and a big old paycheck. However, not that big compared to what Raiola himself would make. Sir Alex later told the media that he distrusted Raiola from the moment he met him. But he was not only angry at the agent, but his client too. What Pogba did was a total lack of respect for United in the Scotsman's book.
Well, disappointing Paul Pogba, there's no question about that. I think he showed a lack of respect to the club. But he's made his decision, and although we always felt that was going to be the case, he never really indicated until he left.
In any case, it was all too late. Paul Pogba was now a member of the Bianconeri, a fact that his new teammates will have a hard time wrapping their heads around. The Bianconeri had living legends and world-class talent in the middle of the park where Pogba was supposed to play. It would be a damn near impossible challenge for an established player to compete with Andrea Pirlo, Claudio Marchisio and Arturo Vidal, let alone a 19-year-old kid who, despite his obvious talent, lacked significantly in the experience department. But this particular 19-year-old was different. He was the living proof of the sports adage, if you're good enough, you're old enough. Gianluigi Buffon was worried about people's eyesight over in Manchester. In a TV show called Tiki Taka, the legendary keeper had this to say about Pogba. When he came, we didn't know him, but after only 3 or 4 training sessions, we were impressed by his enormous qualities. My teammates and I looked at each other to say, are they blind in Manchester? In his first season with Juventus, Pogba played over 30 games, scored 5 times, including a last-minute match-winning goal against Bologna, and became a Serie A champion. Andrea Pirlo, a man who knew a thing or two about football and specifically about midfielders, would later remember how ridiculous Pogba's transfer felt. We were just laughing in total disbelief. We were not laughing for any other reason that we were just in total disbelief that this player with so much obvious ability was able to leave a club the size of Manchester United for free. No one was talking about money, his agent, or ego back then. Pogba had set the bar enormously high in his first season, and even Juventus fans were wondering if he could maintain such high standards in the years to come. Well, he not only did exactly that, but took the bar even higher, both for club and country. In his second season, Pogba turned into this machine-like player who could play in literally every single position in the middle of the park. This was truly the year he turned into a worldwide superstar. Halfway through the season, in December of 2013, Pogba's status among the very best young talents in European football was validated by winning the Golden Boy Award, joining the likes of Wayne Rooney and Lionel Messi. The Frenchman was happy and, more importantly, ambitious for more, proven by this interview he gave to Tutor Sport. What do I want to win? Given that dreaming is not forbidden, in my dreams there is a magnificent set: the Serie A, the Champions League, and the World Cup with France. By the end of the season, Pogba crossed an item off his extremely ambitious list, winning the Serie A with a record 102 points and 33 wins, finishing 17 points clear of Roma. His international career had also skyrocketed. Just like he did in every previous age group, he had become the first in-game leader of the under-20 national team and then its captain, playing an influential role in Le Bleu's first ever U20 World Cup victory, which made France the first nation to win all 5 FIFA 11-a-side men's titles. Despite a managerial change that saw Conte leaving his place to Allegri, both Pogba and Juventus remained steadfast in their pursuit of Serie A dominance. The very next year, Pogba was the youngest player among the nominees for the 2015 Ballon d'Or, but fans were reassured as he was coming fresh off of a contract renewal. Almost everything was perfect, bar the elimination against Barca in the Champions League and a hamstring injury that kept Pogba out for 2 months. Unfortunately, this was only the beginning of his subsequent injury woes, a recurring theme for the rest of his career. In his 4th year at the club, Pogba was wearing the coveted number 10 jersey and playing in a much more advanced position on the pitch, sparking ongoing debates about his ideal role, something that no coach, fan, or pundit in the world would be able to find in the coming years, except Didier Deschamps. Even though Pogba failed to win the Champions League trophy he and his team so desperately wanted, his performances had put him in the first spot of many clubs' transfer lists, ultimately leading to his record-breaking transfer to Manchester United, the last move that altered the trajectory of his career. From this point onwards, leaving international football aside, everything got out of hand, and Pogba's relationship with his future coach, Jose Mourinho, the very man he was excited to work with, would be an influential figure in his fall from grace. In the summer of 2016, Pogba gave football fans one of the better highlights of his career, leading his team during Euro 2016. He, alongside Antoine Griezmann, were the star men in Le Bleu's run to the final. Pogba was already a star in European football by then, but weirdly, he always looked even better with his country's colours. While some fans found the explanation in Didier Deschamps' tactical prowess, others believed that the national team, more so the environment it provided to Pogba, supercharged him. He was surrounded by lifelong friends, and Didier Deschamps himself was very much like a father figure to the player. A clear affection Pogba lacked growing up because of the distance between himself and his brothers and father. Even though they ended up losing against Cristiano Ronaldo's Portugal in the final in 2016, Pogba's performances in the tournament helped Juventus squeeze just a little bit more from United, and after weeks of hard bargaining between United, Juventus and Mino Raiola, Paul Pogba officially returned to Old Trafford. The €105 million fee made him the world's most expensive player at the time. Upon his return, Pogba described United as the club with a special place in his heart. The Frenchman said the Red Devils was the right place for him to achieve everything he hoped to in the game. Having the opportunity to work with Jose Mourinho was also an important factor in his decision. Mourinho, too, was excited to have him in his squad. Paul is one of the best players in the world and will be a key part of the United team I want to build here for the future. He has the chance to be at the heart of this club for the next decade and beyond. Neither Pogba nor Mourinho could have known at the time that the reality would be a very different story, and that the mutual excitement they felt for one another would later turn into a toxic relationship. As early as his first game back at United, Pogba's attitude on the pitch became a never-ending topic. His body language and defensive efforts were immediately put into question. It was almost impossible to think about Paul Pogba without that hefty price tag on him. Everyone in United wanted him to lead by example. And to his credit, Mourinho was protective of his new signing at the beginning, lashing out at the, quote, Einsteins of the media who were too quick to write the Frenchman off. Pogba paid back the Special One's trust in helping him win the League Cup. Fans were cheering for their returning star, but unbeknownst to them, their star's body was deteriorating. Another injury to his hamstring left Pogba out for over a month. But luckily, he was back when it mattered the most, winning the UEFA Europa League final against Ajax. After 9 years, Manchester United was once again celebrating a continental trophy. But who could have known that the 2017 Europa League was going to be the last trophy United would win for years? As fate would have it, it was also going to be the last ever trophy Paul Pogba would win in club football. Paul Pogba started his second season back in Manchester in great form and scored 2 goals in his first 2 games. However, his body was giving in. Another hamstring injury struck the Frenchman early in the season and kept him out for 2 months this time. Even though United were exceeding expectations and would finish the season as runners-up behind Man City, Pogba was never free of criticism. Jose Mourinho would later describe United's second-place finish as his biggest achievement, given the terrible state of the club and its player base. Like most fans, the Special One's support for Pogba was also dwindling. To the Frenchman's absolute disgust, Mourinho would use Scott McTominay in his stead in crucial games. In his country's colours though, Pogba was passing every test imaginable with flying colours. There was no doubt whatsoever who his on-field family was. Pogba, like he did throughout his career, both in underage groups and as a pro, was the beating heart of Le Bleu. Pogba reached the peak of his national team career in 2018. Some would even say that this was his absolute best for club and country. He and his friends in blue were crowned world champions in Russia. Pogba, dancing on his way towards a World Cup in Luzhnitsky Stadium, was going to be one of his very last happy moments on a football pitch. The following season, thanks in some part to this historic achievement, but mostly due to Antonio Valencia's unavailability, Pogba was promoted to captaincy. However, after a series of disappointing results, combined with Pogba's continued negligence on defense and his overall carefree attitude, Mourinho would release him from his new duty immediately. Even though both parties denied the rumours at first, it quickly became apparent that they could no longer stand one another. The ego battle between the Special One and the most expensive player in the world, who was now a world champion, had reached a crescendo in December 2018. Allegedly, Mourinho had taken Pogba to his room and fired off with both barrels. You don't play, you don't respect players and supporters, and you kill the mentality of the good, honest people around you. You are like a person with a flu, with a virus in a closed room. You pass that virus to the others. Mourinho's diagnosis made a lot of noise, but it only resonated with a limited portion of the fan base. Besides, there wasn't much Man United's board could do. Paul Pogba was too big of an investment to merely back out from, especially only a single season after his return to the club. On top of that, his best years were still ahead of him, or so the board and Man United fans thought. Pogba ultimately came out on top of this battle against Mourinho, and the United board took the easier decision to part ways with the Special One instead. Shortly after the appointment of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, it felt like Pogba could finally become the player every United fan imagined he would be. Under Solskjaer, Pogba was unlocked, and he recorded his best season for United with 16 goals and 11 assists. While some believe these to be the signs of Pogba getting back to his Juventus days, others thought that these were just numbers on a page that didn't really help hiding Pogba's poor performances. Everyone obsessed with United was obsessed with Pogba and how he could finally play a key role in the future of the Red Devils. All the while, the Frenchman's mind was elsewhere. In an event in Tokyo, Pogba talked openly about leaving Man United once again. After this season and everything that happened this season, with my season being the best season as well, I think for me it could be a good time to have a new challenge somewhere else. I am thinking of this. Real Madrid and Juventus were already linked to Pogba, and United had allegedly refused an official offer which would see James Rodriguez joining the Reds alongside a €30 million payment. Pogba's story could be totally different had United accepted that alleged offer, but unfortunately for him, they didn't, and from that moment until the end of his second stint at United, Pogba was stuck in a vicious cycle. On his day, he was a threat, and when his body allowed him, he could still grab the name by the scruff of its neck. Even though he never reached the bar he set back in Juventus or with the national team, he showed glimpses of the player he once was. Sadly, it was never enough for the fans. Around the same time, Pogba suffered multiple injuries to his hamstrings, and his ankle became an even bigger problem, forcing him to undergo surgery which wasn't going to be the last one of his career. Now that we have the whole picture before our eyes, you could say that this was the beginning of the end for the Frenchman. Despite his efforts, Pogba was never fully healthy after his ankle injury. He made his way back to the pitch all right, but his last memories in red would be torrid, missing his chances to win a second Europa League after losing to Villarreal in 2021, getting sent off during a 5-0 battering by Liverpool, and coming off the pitch while fans at Old Trafford were yelling "fuck off Pogba" during a match against Norwich, unofficially putting an end to his days in Manchester. Injuries, falling short of expectations, lackluster performances, being treated as a virus were all weighing heavily on Pogba's shoulders. But he seemed to have been dealing with all of it relatively well, at least at surface level. But there was a significant difference between failing as a football player and being tested with his life and the life of the ones he cared for the most. Whether or not fans believed it, Pogba was trying to rekindle his career, but his entourage was working around the clock to make everything worse. In March 2022, Pogba was back in Paris to see his family. Allegedly, his brother Matthias had given Paul instructions for a meeting where they would get together with a couple of childhood friends who were once teammates of Pogba back from his Roissy days. On March 19, Pogba met with the said person and 4 others aged between 27 and 36 in an apartment in Paris. But this was not a get-together of old teammates. The men Pogba found himself with were armed, and they were demanding €13 million for him. €1 million for every single year Pogba spent as a professional footballer playing up until that point. Complying with the men, Pogba wanted to send the demanded amount, but was refused by his bank. Luckily, the men in question let Pogba leave physically unharmed. However, this was mentally damaging to say at the least. Poor Pogba's agony more than doubled when he found out that it was his very own brother Matthias who was directly linked to the men, and he was now very much a part of the investigation regarding the extortion attempt. As crazy as it sounds, this wasn't Pogba's biggest problem when it came to his off-the-pitch troubles. That very same week, while he was in Manchester for their Champions League clash against Atletico Madrid, he was to live the worst fear of his life. United lost the game, but Pogba couldn't care about it less. While he was playing and his wife and mother of his children, Zulay, was watching him from the stands, burglars broke into his family's multi-million-dollar mansion in Hale, Greater Manchester, and took away a few prized possessions from a safe, including Pogba's World Cup winning medal. But cherished valuables being stolen wasn't the worst part, because as Pogba himself would later reveal, when the burglars broke into their home, their children were there too, sound asleep. As if his ties with the club and the city were not at an all-time low, this horrible event accelerated Pogba's imminent exit. On June 1st, 2022, the move everyone was expecting for a long time finally happened, and Paul Pogba left United once again for free and rejoined Juventus, arriving in Manchester as one of the top talents in Europe and the most expensive player in the world, and playing his last game for the Red Devils while fans were yelling at him to go to hell, pushed Pogba further down into the abyss. The Frenchman, in his historically unsuccessful Amazon Prime documentary called Pogmentary, revealed one of his primary objectives in rejoining Juventus. My thought process is to show Manchester that they made a mistake in waiting to give me a contract. Unfortunately for Pogba, he would fail miserably in his mission to prove United wrong. After what seemed like a never-ending break, Pogba was ready to make the headlines by his performances, but his body wasn't. Just 10 days after joining the Bianconeri, the Frenchman was injured during a pre-season training session in the United States. This time, it was his knee. Both the club and the player were on the same page about what they should do immediately. Pogba was pulled off from the rest of the United States pre-season tour for his treatment. And as for the treatment itself, Pogba and Juve were not in agreement. After seeing a knee specialist in his native France, Pogba had taken the decision to undergo a more conservative therapy rather than undergoing surgery. He was sure to miss the beginning of the season, but that was only a small part of his problems. Shortly after his umpteenth injury, Pogba faced another problem, a recurring problem called Matthias Pogba, who advised his very own brother of terrible deeds in a video that instantly went viral.
I will also tell you very important things about Kylian Mbappé, the star of the football right now. And there will be elements and many testimonies to corroborate my words. All disease will be explosive and make a lot of noise.
According to Matthias Pogba, who was questioning whether Paul deserved his place in the French team and the honour of playing in the World Cup, whether he deserved to be a starter at Juventus, and whether he was a trustworthy person, Paul had supposedly paid large sums of money to a sorcerer to curse his Le Bleu teammate Kylian Mbappé. Instantly responding to his brother's claims through his legal representatives, Pogba admitted to have talked to someone who claimed to be a sorcerer, but denied any attempts of putting a curse on Mbappé or any other wrongdoing. In his response, Pogba's teammates made sure that everyone knew that this was the follow-up to the extortion attempt from a few months earlier. There he was, good old Paul Pogba once again being the talk of the town for all the wrong reasons. Talking about how traumatic this whole experience was, Pogba said he no longer wanted money, no longer wanted to play football, but instead just wanted to be a normal person.
The only people can hurt you is the people that they are close to you. That's it. The enemies, you know where they are, and they will not that they're, but the people that they close, the friends, family, that you think they're happy for you, they're the one that they can destroy you.
He already had a long list of terrible injuries, and the way he was hurt by people around him was now at the top of that list. Sadly, it wasn't going to be the last one either. The final nail in the coffin wasn't far away. After getting no results from the conservative method he chose, Pogba was convinced he needed to undergo surgery.
Salut à tous, c'est la pioche. J'espère que vous allez tous bien. En tout cas, moi ça va. Ça va, Dieu merci. L'opération s'est très bien passée. Alhamdoulilah, on va récupérer, on va revenir très très vite. Je voulais vous remercier tous pour vos messages, votre support. Et sachez que voilà, mentalement, ça va malgré tous les soucis, malgré la blessure et les autres problèmes. Mais mentalement, ça va.
2 months later, the Frenchman was deemed ready to make his return to training and hopefully to match fitness in due time. However, while his right knee was healing, his right thigh had been under too much pressure, and even light training work was enough to seriously damage it. Pogba was going to miss the World Cup. For so many fans, another successful run at the tournament could rekindle the fire in the Frenchman, and now he was deprived of that opportunity too. On February 2023, Pogba was finally able to make his second debut for Juventus when he came on as a substitute against Torino in the Serie A. This was not the lucky break he was looking for though. The next few months saw Pogba dropped out of the squad by Allegri for disciplinary reasons, followed by yet another injury blow. Pogba had to wait 390 days to make it into a starting 11 of a football match, and within 23 minutes of it, he was out again. His season was wrapped up. Allegri was still hopeful of his return though. We are all disappointed, especially as he was doing very well. It's sad as he made so many sacrifices to recover, now has to stop again after feeling that pain in the quadricep. Paul is a grown man, he has broad shoulders and can get over this too. It took another 3 months for Pogba to recover. On August the 20th, 2023, during Juventus' opener to the Serie A campaign, he wouldn't feature in the starting 11, but considering the circumstances, him making it onto the bench was a victory in and of itself. Pogba didn't play a single minute that day against Udinese, but he was eligible for a random doping test, a test that Italy's national anti-doping organization, NATO, would later reveal came out positive. Prohibited substance detected, non-endogenous testosterone metabolites. Read the statement by NATO. Pogba, through his lawyers, immediately reached out to his club and admitted to having used a drug prescribed to him by a doctor and friend of his who lives and works in the United States. Juventus's response was letting Pogba know that they won't be paying his €8 million per year salary until he was cleared of the doping charges. Paul kept denying any wrongdoing and requested a B sample. As we all know now, like the rest of the world does, that second test also came out positive. Either Pogba's Miami-based doctor friend had tricked him, or he had used the prohibited drug willingly. In any case, the World Anti-Doping Agency's rule was abundantly clear. Athletes are solely responsible for any prohibited substance found in their system, despite whether there was an intention to cheat or not. Pogba then took to social media after his 4-year ban from football was announced. I am sad, shocked, and heartbroken that everything I've built in my professional playing career has been taken away from me. While it's definitely a sad story, Pogba now has enough time to reflect on his entire career and hopefully to find out what went wrong and why. Maybe he will come to the conclusion that his decisions, maybe more than bad luck alone, have also contributed to his sadness, shock, and heartbreak. The Frenchman, like every single football fan who saw him at his best, will ask himself the same question. What if he chose his entourage better? What if he initially stayed at Juventus? What if he didn't get into a battle with Mourinho? What if, well, there are about 1 billion ways to complete that question. But we'll let you come up with the rest of it yourselves. Although it's not easy to admit it, neither for Pogba or for football fans in general, NATO's decision probably looks to be the end for the Frenchman. Do you think he'll try to get back to football? And more importantly, do you think he can do it? Where do you rate him amongst French football icons? What do you think was the biggest mistake he ever made in his career? If you want to take another deep dive into an equally, if not more controversial player's story, check out this video to find out how Neymar Jr. destroyed his very own career. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll catch you next time.